it's full screen.
All right. I guess without further ado, let's go to work and take a look at the 270 College Basketball Selection Show. On the phone is Trevor Alber, and I am Dustin Downey. I am the host for tonight's event. Trevor's done a phenomenal job commissioning this league, and it's been my pleasure to work on the bracketology bits. So before we go into the actual bracket, let's take a look at what we saw in last week's bracket. If you'll notice, our 4-1 seeds were Wisconsin, Missouri, Duke, and Southern California. And we will still use the same regionals, the same sub-regional locations. But the question is, did those 4 teams do enough to stay at that top line? Now, these are your conference champions. Last week, when we had our show, we saw that Eduardo Ochoa won the Big 12 Conference. 5 others have joined him and the New Mexico Lobos in claiming conference championships for themselves. That's the Virginia Cavaliers and Troy Moore, the Villanova... Oh, crap, what's Villanova? Zach Algaze is going to give me... The Wildcats, thank you. He's going to give me crap for that, and that's going to be great. Sam Risebord, the Michigan Wolverines, won the Big Ten, and that might have been the second biggest story in the Big Ten tournament. Dennis Muxlow in Northern Illinois won the Newer Player League, and Gonzaga and Whitmar got through the jungle that was the SEC Conference Tournament. Now, we have 7 conferences and 6 conference champions. Trevor, can you tell us what happened in the American Athletic and Pac-12?
So, we came to the decision that besides they were having troubles getting their games scheduled, that we move on beside only one person was really going to be affected by whether or not they won the conference or not. But they'd only played 10 games so far, so we felt it fair to move on.
So that makes it a no contest. Call it due to COVID, call it due to whatever you like. We have 6 conference champions, and they automatically clinched a bid into this tournament. So this is how you build a bracket. You rank the teams. You take a look at everything, the whole quality of work. And our conference commissioners have been doing that all season long, providing you with top 25s. And this week we ranked all the way to 40 to make sure that we got the right 36 teams in. We asked, what did you accomplish? We made the curve. We did the composite rankings. Made sure to place teams in a way that you weren't playing teams from your same conference. You won't see a team for your same conference until the Elite 8, with one notable exception, and we will show you that in the bracket. We created quality matchups. A geographical best fit is more important when you're actually playing with real teams. This is all virtual, so it's close, but it's not great. But this is competitive matchups to find the one true champion of this league. And Trevor, I hope that this bracket builds you the championship that your league deserves. So let's go to the 1 seeds. The number 1 in the Omaha Regional is the Missouri Tigers. Trevor, tell us a little bit about Missouri.
So, Missouri and Brendan Borman came out of the SEC and they were runner-ups. They came in second place to Rick Whitmer and Gonzaga. He finished the season at 24 wins and 2 losses with a 92% win percentage. He also had 5 top 10 wins and another 8 in the top 25 with only 1 top 25 loss, which was to Nicholas Sloan in Western Kentucky.
That's a strong resume. Missouri was ranked in the top 2 by all 4 commissioners. In the Oklahoma City Regional, it's the USC Trojans and the only undefeated team in this bracket. Now, they're unable to claim that championship because that's the AAC and Pac-12 conference. But Trevor, tell us something we should be prepared for when we see USC.
USC and Javier Rodriguez, like you said, being undefeated, was in the semifinals of the AAC Pac-12 conference. They've went up against some really good competition this year. 6-0. 6 of their 15 wins come in the top 25, and they were averaging 382.81 EVs in their 15 games played.
382 electoral votes. Those are blowout wins. We move to Grand Rapids, where the 1 seed is Wisconsin's. Wisconsin lost in that Big Ten tourney to Indiana, but Coach Eric York and the Badgers look to make amends for that in the big tournament. What do you know about Wisconsin, Trevor?
Yes, like you said, Eric York with Wisconsin, they finished the season at 26-2, which outside the undefeateds was one of the best records. I think he was one of 2 people with only 2 losses, and only 2 more people only had 1 loss or none, with Javier being a 1 seed in USC and Evan Charles in Coastal Carolina, which we will hear here shortly. He also had 16 top 25 wins and only 1 loss, so he has played a very competitive schedule so far. And as you mentioned, one of his 2 losses came in the Big Ten semifinals to Indiana and Adam Zacher.
And Wisconsin also won the mid-season invitational tournament there just a few weeks ago. Now, sliding over to the 4th regional, the 4th number 1 seed are the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Now, Gonzaga has jumped from a projection of a 3 seed all the way up to a 1 seed. How did they do it?
Sorry, who were we talking about right there?
Gonzaga,
they ended the season at 15-3 and had a very, very tough patch there at the end of the season where they had to go through, I believe they started off with, Harvard in the first round. No, it wasn't Harvard, but they started off with really good competition in the first round of the SEC championship, moved on and played the 2 seed Florida Gators and Chris Lassinger in the semifinals, and then beat Brendan Borman in the finals. And all 3 of his losses come in the top 25.
So that might be our biggest upward move out of the whole bracket. Watching Gonzaga slide up into that final number 1 seed. So we'll go straight into... Oh, I'm going to show that later. I'm going to go straight into the Omaha Regional. Now, we've got the 1-seeded Missouri Tigers. And they'll be playing their first couple of rounds in New Orleans. They'll take on the winner of UCLA and Baylor. And down there on the other side of that New Orleans bracket is the 4-seeded Nebraska Cornhuskers and the Texas Tech Red Raiders in the 4-5 game. On the bottom side of the region, the number 2-seeded Coastal Carolina. Georgetown is the number 7. Virginia Tech at 3. And the Indiana Hoosiers at 6. Now, Trevor, what do you see in those matchups, those first-round matchups? Nebraska versus Texas Tech, that's you and Colton Conroy.
Me and Colton, we've played a few times this season. I believe we've split 1-1, so I feel that would be a very good first-round match. And then UCLA and Baylor, I feel like that should be a really good match to see who gets to go on to face Brendan Borman. Ultimately, if I had to make a prediction in this quadrant of the bracket, I would predict to see a Missouri versus Virginia Tech in the Omaha Regional.
Virginia Tech. They kind of slid there at the end of the season. That last week was not kind to them, and they're playing a very plucky Indiana team that just knocked off one seed in this tournament and in the Big Ten tournament, the Wisconsin Badgers. That could be a first-round matchup to circle. Obviously, Jason Casey and Virginia Tech's the favorite. But Indiana can scare people.
And in our bracket, with there being half the size of the 64-team March Madness bracket, the 6th seed would be the 12th seed. So 12 seeds are never a fan of March Madness bracket makers.
Right. So we'll move on to the Oklahoma City Regional. Now we see that undefeated USC Trojan squad. They'll play against the winner of Louisville and Kentucky. Then in the other piece of that bracket is the 4th-seeded Western Kentucky Hilltoppers and the 5th-seed Michigan State Spartans. As we slide to the bottom half of the bracket, we've got Harvard, that's Patrick Gose's squad, against Boston College out in Las Vegas. Seems right to take 2 East Coast teams and send them to the desert. And then we've got Northern Illinois, the conference champions of the newer player league. That's Dennis Muxlow against the Providence Friars and Jeremy Cooper Sperber. What's the first thing that jumps out at you when you look at the Oklahoma City bracket?
The first thing that jumps out to me is I feel that overall I think this quadrant is very well-rounded and a lot of even matches, I would have to say, in this bracket. Obviously, I think our clear-cut favorite coming out of this one would probably be USC and the undefeated with Javier, but it'd be hard to fully predict. I really like the Dan Warner, Michigan State, and Nicholas Sloan first-round matchup. That could be a very good game. And then Dennis and Jeremy with Northern Illinois and Providence is definitely going to be another good one. And don't count out Scott Etchery. He's been a very good contestant going up against a number 2 seed in Harvard, who came out of the regular season with a 20-6 record, which is very impressive from being in that SEC, the brutal SEC.
That SEC is tough. Now let's make sure that we look at that 8-9 game. That's Louisville and Bryce Hawkins and Andrew Miller in Kentucky. That could be a really fun game. It seems like both of those teams have been in a lot of games and come up just short. That should be a compelling must-watch early round game. And if I'm looking to the second round here, not trying to say that there can't be upsets, but if I'm looking and we go chalk through the first round, I'm looking at that Northern Illinois Harvard game as one of the most interesting second round matchups in the entire bracket.
And I wouldn't count out Western Kentucky and Nicholas Sloan either. They have been one of 2 people to have a couple of upsets in beating some very high-ranked players in this tournament so far.
That's true. I think that Western Kentucky did themselves a favor by scheduling great opponents. The problem is I think they may have scheduled too many of them, and they lost some of those great games and wound up on the 4 line. They're really, really hard to predict what happens there. We could see some representation in the Elite 8 out of the Big 12. And as the conference commissioner for the Big 12, I'd love to see that.
And like you said, with the most games played the most games overall there was actually a tie between Nicholas Sloan in Western Kentucky and Colton Conroy in Texas Tech. And Nicholas came out 46-29, and Colton came out at 45-30. So one more game given in the win column to Nicholas Sloan in Western Kentucky with a whopping, that's like what, almost 75 games, I believe, exactly.
Yeah. Those two teams were really close. And to be honest with you, the season series went to Colton Conroy and the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
I believe it was 3 wins, Colton. Or how many wins was it for Colton?
I think it was 4-2.
4-2?
Yeah. They played one another 6 times.
Yes, they did.
It was fun watching the Big 12, wasn't it?
It was lovely. I think there was twice as many games in that conference than any other conference every week.
I think you were right. And we move on to Grand Rapids, where we see that 1-seeded Wisconsin Badgers. They were going to be the 1 seed in Grand Rapids last week. They're the 1 seed in Grand Rapids this week, but they move around to the bottom right corner of the bracket instead of that top left corner that goes to the overall number 1 seed. They'll take on the winner of Iowa State and Wichita State, a battle in the cornfield in the opening game. That's Evan Jansen and Robert Hodgkinson. Also in Buffalo, we'll see the Florida Gators against the Big East champion Villanova. And then we go to the bottom, we see Duke and Guillermo Javia against the Oklahoma Sooners and yours truly, Help. And then the number 3 seed, Brigham Young, against St. John's. That's Jeffrey Brobowitz and David Robeson. I want to start there. St. John's started off really hot in this league and had some really good early wins. Really set them up to succeed and kind of tapered down the stretch. Whereas David Robeson took a while. I mean, BYU won games early, but you wondered 3 weeks into the season whether they were going to get to eligibility. And they just slid right up and kept going in the SEC. So they kind of had a role reversal. St. John's has the ability to take that game. But BYU's certainly been stronger as of late. What do you think about that matchup?
With St. John's and BYU, definitely a good game. Both coming from conferences. Well, BYU definitely coming from the SEC, which was a very stacked conference. And coming in at a 3 seed, believe if they were in a few of the other conferences, you might be seeing them slide up into a 2 seed. And St. John's, Jeffrey Brobowitz, as he just said in the comments, free-falling. He had a couple of rough patches in this league, but I believe he managed to stay in the top 25 all year. And he lost to Zach Algaze and Villanova, the 5 seed in the semifinal of the Big East bracket, I believe. But I definitely see that as a very interesting matchup, and I think this whole region looks like one of the toughest regions.
This region is stacked. You've got a conference champion sitting at the 5 seed with a matchup against the Florida Gators, who the reason that they're not a champion is because the other 2 teams are 1 seeds. You know, that's a really compelling first round game. It's a scary start up in Buffalo for them. But I gotta ask, is this gonna be Wisconsin Duke or is it gonna be something else?
I would not be surprised if something else slides through. I mean, as I was saying, Villanova, Florida, I feel like that's going to be a really close game. Let's see, BYU, St. John's, and Oklahoma, Duke, can't count anything out. If I were going to have to predict one upset, if we were going based off chalk, I would predict the BYU making it to the Grand Rapids Regional.
Well, that is that's a big statement. That's David Robeson's BYU Mormons, the Cougars. And we move to Philadelphia, where we see two teams that shot their way up into the 1 and 2 seeds. That's Gonzaga and Virginia. The Bulldogs getting there by way of winning the SEC, and the Cavaliers making it through the ACC tournament at 11-1, the fewest games played of any team in the tournament. They didn't make the 15, but they won their conference. But if we start up at the top, we'll look at Denver and Syracuse in that play-in game. That could be a really interesting one for the right to play Gonzaga. The 4-5 game here is Michigan and New Mexico. That's Dan Riseboard versus Eduardo Ochoa. That's two conference champions, the champion of the Big Ten and the champion of the Big 12. That's not a Elite 8 matchup. That's a round 1 matchup. And it's a scary one at that. I don't want to pick that game. Then if we go to the bottom of the bracket, we see that 2-seeded Virginia Cavaliers team against 7-seeded Creighton. And the California Golden Bears taking on the Bucknell Bison in a battle of big, meaty opponents. Trevor, tell us about this bracket.
I mean, as you said, I think with that 4-5 matchup with Michigan and New Mexico, definitely one to have everyone's eyes on at the beginning of this tournament, with Eduardo Ochoa and New Mexico on a very hot streak. I believe they went 6-1 over the past week and a half of the tournament, and rolled through some tough competition in a few other 4 and 5 seeds with Colton Conroy and Nicholas Sloan in that tournament, and also went through Evan Jansen, who was another player in this bracket. And then coming out with Bucknell in California, with John Bardsley as Bucknell and James Vandelin at California. You can't count John out. He might be a 6th seed, but that's just because he's had some rough patches and it knocked him down a little bit. But he's also the only player to take out 3 undefeated teams in this tournament.
Bucknell's a hard one to crack right there. My season series against him, the Oklahoma season series against him, we went 1-2, but none of those games were decided by more than 20 electoral votes. Go ahead.
Me and John, we also played 1-1, and I blew him out by, I think he said at the time, the biggest margin, but then he got me back like a week or 2 later and blew me out by about the same margin, so pretty fair exchange there.
It's a great team and a great opponent. That could be really interesting. Who do you see being the 2 teams that make the Elite 8 out of Philadelphia?
Oh, this is a tough one. I would say Gonzaga out of the top would be the likely one. I think it'd be hard to see an upset coming out of there, but definitely wouldn't count anything out. And this bottom half is just hard. I feel like Troy Moore is most likely going to make it through, but you just can't count out James Vandelin and John Bardsley. Both of them are very well opponents and have played very well so far in this tournament.
So there is the bracket, the whole 36, the whole enchilada, everyone from overall number 1 seed Missouri to the last team in, the Syracuse Orange. And I want to go backwards because I put this in the wrong spot. Here are your last 4 in and your first 4 out. Your last 4 in are your 4-9 seeds, the Baylor Bears out of the Big 12 with Ryan Simmons as their coach. Andrew Miller's SEC team, the Kentucky Wildcats. Robert Hodgkinson and the Wichita State Shockers, and Syracuse out of the ACC. Stephanie Lane's squad is the last team in. TCU from the Big 12, John Romine, and he's the first team out. And the margin between Syracuse and TCU was so small. Trevor, how small was that margin?
The margin between TCU and Stephanie Lane and Syracuse was 2 points. And this week we did, instead of only ranking through 25, because we needed to get to 36, we ranked to 40. And that would be, if you were first this week, you got 40 points and so on. So it was a very, very tight margin between John Romaine and TCU and Stephanie Lane and Syracuse.
That's the biggest change and the smallest margin. It's TCU out, Syracuse in. Matthew Escada and Texas A&M out of the SEC, Houston Perry and Memphis out of the AAC Pac-12, and Chad Harris's Appalachian State team out of the AAC Pac-12 also made that first 4 out. So we take a look at this again, and we see those brackets, and we see it start to meld, and we get into that conference. We see the conferences, the championship starting to come together out of this whole bracket. Tell me, Trevor, what you're most excited about, and I think it might be something that has to do with some money.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to, after this stream, we will release this bracket and post it and give everyone, I'm thinking till the end of tomorrow, to submit a bracket. And if for the winner of the bracket, they will receive $10 from myself. And if anyone gets the whole correct every single game, will be $50. And I was saying, I sent it out in the message when this was going to be streamed, that it would be points will be based off the same way that the actual March Madness bracket is. So in the 1-8, this whole first round of the bracket, it'll be 10 points. When you move on to the next round, it'll be 20, 40, 80, and then 120 in the final.
So how much are those 8-9 games worth?
Those 8-9 games, I wasn't going to count. We'll go with those being 5 points.
I like it. 5 points for the 8-9 games, 10, 20, 40, 80 and 160 for the champion. Boy, I don't want to pick a champion right now. That looks scary to me. So who's in? By conference, the SEC got the most teams in with 7. The Big 12 got 6 in. The AAC and Pac-12, the ACC, the Big East, and the Big 10 all got 5 teams apiece in. And there are 2 representatives from the newer player league. So there's no one bid leagues, but there is a 2-bid league. Top to bottom, some of these conferences were really, really tight. Trevor, what conference do you think had the smallest margin between their top competitors?
Between like the top and the bottom, or like their top 2?
Between the top and that middle piece, the top half. If you were to look at the top half, who was the tightest in the top half?
It would definitely, for me, be between the Big 12 and the Big East. As you can see, most in the ranking, the Big 12, a lot of them were right there in the 4, 5, 6 seed range. And then in the Big East, even as you said, like when we were ranking them, they all came in at like the exact same portion of the rankings.
Yeah, the Big 12's got 1 4 seed, 2 5 seeds, and a 7 seed, as well as an 8 and a 9. And the Big East, I think all 5 of them are between a 5 and a 7. I think they are. They're so tight. The SEC was so top-heavy. Some great competitions out in the SEC. And there it is with your conference alignments. If you'll notice, the bracket is colored in such a way that you can see which conference each team is from in here. And with the exception, the notable exception, that Texas Tech and Baylor are both in the top half of the Omaha Regional. Everywhere else, you should be able to notice that there is not a single place that 2 teams from the same conference could play one another before they reach the Elite 8, the 3rd round of the bracket. And I'm telling you, that's not easy. But it's a balanced bracket. We got a lot of teams. We got a lot to look at. And, boy, I just can't wait for the games to start. Can you, Trevor?
Oh, no, I'm ready for it.
All right. Well, you guys heard it. We will post the bracket for people to put their predictions in and send them back to us. Get those brackets in by the end of the day on Monday. We'll start playing matches on Tuesday with these 8-9 games, and we'll get to work. It has been my honor, my privilege to bring this to you. Good luck to all of you in the tournament. For Trevor Alber, I'm Dustin Downey. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your